problem that's occurring in first world countries is the increase of an aging population. When you have more free choice, you don't have to be tied down. People don't want to have babies as much. I can kind of understand. 3D girls are a bit more difficult to figure out, but you have to draw the line somewhere, right? Right. This issue is one that the movie, or OVA, as this is on my anime list, in question bases its premise on. There are too many old people and not enough medical staff to attend to them, whether it be in a hospital or at a home. With this issue persisting, health secretaries try to find a new solution, and the first being putting the old in a high-tech bed that can take care of everything for them. One of the things your eyes will immediately draw to is the big names on the front of the box. Hiroyuki Kitabuko on directing, Katsuhiro Otomo being a writer, along with Satoshi Kon, credited with key animation, layout, and planning. And for 1991, these were impressive people to all have on one project. Too bad it doesn't go anywhere. One of the obvious flaws being the animation. It's clear to see where the time was distributed, with the beginning having very still frames and some of the characters looking off model, while towards the end it really steps up with some fluid motion and greater detail. But the instances where corners were cut do really stand out, like how towards the beginning the trams look as if they were cut from somewhere else and placed on top, or a specific instant that comes to mind when the protagonist Haruko screams, but the frame shows her perfectly still, with background rigid and her hair static, even though moments before she was supposed to be in motion. You can tell this wasn't a stylistic choice, as this happens nowhere else. The backgrounds look solid for the most part, and I feel as if I gave this a bit of an easier time, as I'm a bit of a pushover when it comes to traditional cel-style animation. Also, credit to the character designs. I do complain a bit about same face, and it's safe to say most of these characters have unique designs. The same uniqueness can't be said of their personalities, however. One of the immediate problems I have with Roujin-Z is what it's supposed to be. The themes, characters, execution all fall into this big mess where I have difficulty deciding whether I'm supposed to be taking this seriously and searching for meaning, or just sitting back and having fun, doing both. What do I mean by this? Well, the most glaring issue is that the world has a sense of realism with the whole aging population aspect, and if you look from Wikipedia or other reviews, people seem convinced of certain mature themes like universal healthcare or the standoff between traditional values and modern technology, yet they never go anywhere with it aside from the introductory exposition. Okay, an aging population is an issue, and the state is taxed by taking care of them. The idea of the Z001 is cruel, but if you follow the perspective of Haruko and what I feel is Otomo's position, and think that's no good and dismiss it for that sole reason, then we're back at square one with no development made whatsoever. The film poses the two sides, but clearly favours one and never goes into details with the specifics. How much longer could the state last without this plan? What's the legality of putting people into these machines? Would it even work in the long run? These questions and more that you will surely have are never explained. But to be fair, a lot of this is tossed aside when the bed becomes a supposed mech and busts out terrorizing the city. Did I mention this is an action flick? Well, you wouldn't guess it by the introduction, but yeah, this prototype bed can do that. Leading on to another point that may be hit or miss, depending on how far you can push your suspension of disbelief. Coming back to the glaring issue of realism, the internal consistency is unbelievable. Whether it's big or small, I'll try and go through it all. So, first of all, why does this prototype bed even have such capabilities, such as moving, transforming, and being able to add other machines onto itself, Canada style? The explanation for the less egregious differences in design, and the outcome is that this guy changed a few pieces here and there when they were designing it. Okay, fine. Sounds reasonable. It turns out, later on, that he's a traitor, and the other more severe capabilities were hidden. But was he the only one to oversee all of this? No one at any point said, why does it need to have the ability to build itself up? Well, later on it turns out that he was also working for the military. Was it also built in a military base? That would make more sense as to why he was able to keep it hidden from the state, but that's my reasoning, not the one given. And all this power is left to one guy. And why does he even want to do this? What's the purpose? To militarize the elderly? A bunch of them hack into it, so clearly this version isn't foolproof. What's the benefit of having these bed-to-mech designs? He says that they use the beds to test a multi-purpose computer. But why? Why beds? Why test it on something that the whole world's now seen after a press conference? And on a less serious note, when this guy is slowly exposed throughout, why doesn't his boss show a little more action than getting slightly annoyed? Can't you, arrest him or something? Then, when the police refuse, you could explain, oh, it's because he has
diplomatic immunity.
Be a better way of showing the twist that he was working with the military rather than him just saying it. Wouldn't they want to monitor the capabilities of the bed's communication? Haruko and the rest know the old guy's in pain because he sends out a message to the computers around her. Don't you think the designer would have thought about this? Surely they must have added that feature or else it wouldn't want to do it. You could argue that maybe it was implemented so if the person was in danger they could communicate, with police, ambulance, fire engine, whatever, but with just anybody, and unmonitored. We know this isn't the case as it was all just a front from the beginning. And this next one's a bit of a pettier no, but how can a computer realize someone's voice just by showing a picture? Does it have a webcam? Did the other old guy code it in? How can you realize someone's voice by looking at their face? To use an example, how does this person sound?
All the people who own birds.
How will I know they own birds?
It'll say so on the cards.
Okay, I'll start going through the files then.
They even come up with a decent idea beforehand of if Haruko knew any names or terms that only those two would know to help communicate, but that doesn't work, I guess. But I think that's way more acceptable, and it would have shown a bit more of a connection between the two, something I'll come on to later. I hope I've explained why I feel a dissonance between the deep themes and the actions, and as to why it means I can't take this seriously. Yeah, it tries to show how mean we can be to reach a goal, but complemented by a scene in which a police officer unhands Haruko to pin down a guy that has other officers already handling him just fine, I find it pretty hard to take seriously. Also, a lot of this stuff can only really be applied to the first half. Like said, the bed turns into a mech, and the second half is mainly about chasing it down, and I don't really find it that interesting. There's no real physical conflict, the humans can't engage with it in any way, and there's one mech fight that lacks any interesting choreography or drama. It's shown that it won't hurt people, surprisingly, so it hurting any of the main characters is slim, even if you cared about them in the first place. And speaking of the characters, they're all pretty one-note and bland. The only people worth mentioning are Haruko and Takeshi. Haruko's friends are all one-shot stereotypes, and everyone else lacks anything, really. Haruko is your generic heroic protagonist who will always do the good thing because she was raised that way, I guess. In one scene, one of her friends gives a bit of backstory, and it's supposed to explain why Haruko became a nurse relating to her grandmother. The only character who goes through any change in this is Takeshi, one of the people behind the creation of the beds. He starts off being dismissive of others and convinced that what he's doing is good, even if a little blindsided, but later on, after a few exchanges, becomes more accepting and turns around. I think he genuinely cares, but has a difficult time acknowledging another side. Not really much to say without spoiling it, but any change is appreciated. For the music, I'll be honest, I barely noticed it, and it left no real impression on me whatsoever. Mainly more classical compositions. No dodgy implementations, though, and sound design solid. The performance of sub and dub is fine. The main difference is that the dub seems a bit more simplistic in language and a bit more over the top on some characters' personalities. Yet I don't feel that either portrays any characters as vastly different. Aside from that detail about Haruko's grandmother, in the sub the details told give Haruko a more justified motivation, even if it's still quite dull and standard. For Roujin-Z, I'll admit, I left a bit disappointed. After seeing Otomo's name attached and the interesting subject matter, I was kind of hoping that this would be a less heard of Akira, but I don't really know who I could recommend this movie to. I can't say I was any more informed over the strategies of dealing with an aging population. The action scenes didn't grip me due to bland direction and lack of tension, which can be said of the whole movie. What's the stake involved? If either side wins, nothing really happens in the long run. The good guys win, and the problems still remain. If the bad guys win, then what? The old guy dies? Really, who cares? He's given next to no time to develop. He had a wife and kids, and that's it. Which can be said for most of the geriatric cast. Real, likeable bunch. He looks really happy to be alive right now, between pissing himself and, well, he's really got nothing left. I'm sure someone will try to argue that by the actions of the characters, they portray how cruelly we treat the old, such as deciding their outcome and the way they're generally treated throughout. And feel free to try and make it, but I don't see it. It has potential, but judging by the rest of the feature, I'm not convinced that was intentional. I wouldn't overly recommend it, but if it interests you, one viewing can't hurt. And if there's one thing that I can't accept, it's the DVD cover. They never mention the threat of nuclear meltdown, that's just a blatant lie, but also the text on the spines flipped upside down. Looks real great.